You're watching Carlton, part of the ITV network.
Fears grow as Belfast peace talks hang by a thread. Protest at Queen fails to mark Scotland's historic day. 20 are killed as cable car plummets to earth. And headmen left frustrated by more Wimbledon rain.
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Katie Derrick.
Good evening. Tony Blair called it the thread by which the future of Northern Ireland hangs. And that thread tonight looks close to breaking. They're still talking 23 hours beyond their deadline. And this evening, the Prime Minister made a personal appeal to Ulster Unionist Assembly members. But despite that, there's now pessimism about the chances of sufficient trust being established on IRA disarmament for the Good Friday Agreement to be put into effect. Our Ireland correspondent John Irvine reports.
The Ulster Unionists have put their proposals down on paper, but for Sinn Féin the document doesn't make good reading. There is a general feeling here tonight that Republicans have given verbal assurances that they now regard decommissioning as an imperative, but the Unionists want a firm commitment in writing and not just from Sinn Féin.
Sinn Féin promises are not bankable. There has therefore to be a commitment from the IRA.
Gerry Adams listened to those remarks and had a brief exchange with David Trimble afterwards. The Sinn Féin leader says his party has moved enough and can budge no further.
We have created huge difficulties for ourselves. The Republicans reading the newspapers this morning will be saying, what have Gerry Adams done, what has Martin McGuinness done, what has the Sinn Féin team done up at Stormont? What have they got for what they have done?
Tony Blair returned to Stormont today because he was convinced that he'd won concessions and that a final push would deliver a deal. He'd this message for the parties.
The entire civilised world will not understand if we cannot put this together and make it work. They simply won't understand it, and rightly.
Tonight, Tony Blair's marathon rescue attempt continues. He's trying to build trust between two parties still deeply suspicious of each other's intentions. John Irvine, ITN, Stormont.
Our political editor, Michael Brunson, who's also at Stormont, joins us now. Michael, what's the latest?
Well, that rescue attempt that John Irvine was talking about is indeed continuing. The Prime Minister had a 35-minute meeting with about 25 members of the whole Ulster Unionist Assembly. But word coming out of that meeting was that it had changed no Unionist minds. We are now told, we've just been told by the Prime Minister's official spokesman just a few moments ago about what happens now. And it seems to me to be a plan, as it were, to bring these talks peaceably, if you like, to their end. First of all, a face-to-face meeting is underway at this moment between Sinn Féin and the Ulster Unionist Party. After that, there will be a full roundtable discussion of all the participants, basically to look at the various written submissions that have been put on the table. Then after that, the talks will adjourn for the night. Tomorrow morning, the parties will come back. The de Chastelaine report on decommissioning will be published. There will then be a statement by the two governments, which, as it were, will sum up what has happened thus far and some kind of decision about what happens next. And we are then told that after that, Tony Blair will leave Belfast.
Mike Brunson, thank you very much indeed. Scotland was launched on what the Queen called a historic journey today when she opened its restored Parliament in Edinburgh. Her way there had been punctuated by a protest, but the mood overwhelmingly has been one of celebration, as our Scotland political correspondent Harry Smith reports.
In Edinburgh's Princes Street Gardens tonight, thousands packed in to hear a concert to celebrate the opening of the new Parliament. A short distance away, Donald Dewar opened another concert by the rock group Garbage as Scotland's capital set out to dance the night away. Earlier, politicians and school children marched in procession in a ceremony designed to mix the traditional and the modern. But this was not planned. The Queen's progress was almost halted when a group of Irish Republican sympathisers advanced to within inches of her coach. One of her mounted escorts galloped alongside to shield the Queen on a section of the route with little visible security. Police officers quickly converged on the spot and some of the protesters were led away. The Queen later told Scotland it was on the threshold of a new constitutional age.
Today is a historic day for Scotland. It is our solemn duty in this chamber, with the eyes of the country upon us, to mark the point when this new Parliament assumes its full powers in the service of the Scottish people.
She then presented the Parliament with a newly commissioned silver mace as a symbol of its newly acquired authority.
And the celebrations still have some time to run, with a spectacular firework display scheduled over the castle ramparts just before midnight. Harry Smith, ITN, Edinburgh.
A cable car plummeted 250 feet to the ground near Grenoble in the French Alps today, killing all 20 on board. All were French men on their way to work at a mountaintop observatory. Terry Lloyd has more details.
Rescue helicopters scrambled to look for survivors were dwarfed by the side of the 9,000-foot-high mountain where the 20 cable car passengers died. It was the worst cable car accident in French history. The victims were on their way to a mountaintop space observatory in the Alps when their car broke loose and plunged almost 300 feet. Only the arm of the gondola remained intact amongst the wreckage. 5 scientists, telecommunication workers and cleaners were aboard the early morning shuttle service heading for the summit. They'd started off from the skiing resort of Saint-Étienne-en-Duvelet near the alpine town of Gap. Government ministers visited the site and revealed that somehow the supporting wires had become detached from the cable car. They promised a full investigation. The privately run lift had recently passed a safety inspection, but the cable, which appears to have snapped, was snaked across the mountainside today. The weather had been fine and the area had attracted many walkers and hill climbers. Tonight, nearby alpine villages were in mourning. All of the passengers were known locally, and cable car transport up and down the mountain was a daily event. Terry Lloyd, ITN.
Here, absent parents who refuse to pay maintenance for their children will face tough new penalties as part of a radical shake-up of the Child Support Agency announced today. They may include the confiscation of driving licences and the threat of jail sentences. The government also promised to simplify the system for calculating child support payments. The political world has been paying the warmest of tributes today to Lord Whitelaw, Willie Whitelaw, who died in his sleep last night at the age of 81. Lady Thatcher said he'd been indispensable to her. Tony Blair recalled him as a thoroughly decent man. Here's John Draper.
William Whitelaw was a Tory patrician and party kingmaker. He was once asked if he regretted not himself becoming Prime Minister.
Frankly, actually, surprisingly, no. I've been greatly rewarded. Because after all, I have served a Prime Minister who has won 3 general elections for the party.
He was remembered this afternoon by that Prime Minister.
It came as a shock. I hadn't understood he was so ill. He was just a marvellous personality. He belonged to that generation of politicians who were big people in their own right. And of course he'd fought in the war and he understood human nature. And I just wish I could have seen him once more to say goodbye.
He spent nearly 2 decades as a farmer and MP in Cumbria before, in the early 70s, Edward Heath made him the first Northern Ireland Secretary. When violence increased, he secretly met the IRA, and although the conflict continued, he was viewed as doing a tough job well. After Ulster, he stood against Margaret Thatcher for the Tory leadership, but when she won, he was fiercely loyal. He served as Home Secretary and Leader of the Commons. His last major office was as Leader of the House of Lords. John Draper, ITN.
Lord Whitelaw, who's died at the age of 81. The weather brought out the umbrellas at Wimbledon again today and played havoc with the schedules. Both men's and women's finals now look like being played on Sunday. Today, Tim Henman managed only 1 full game of his match against Cedric Pioline. Here's Peter Staunton.
A swift exit for Tim Henman, long before the crowd on number 1 court knew what was going on. His quarter-final match had been abandoned for the day, and he was heading for home. Leaving behind his girlfriend, his parents, who along with 15,000 fans were left in the dark. Eventually, they all left. But farcical scenes followed. The weather relented. Jelena Dokic's match was switched to the now almost empty court. Word swiftly got around, thousands flooded back in, just in time to see the players exit and the covers come on for good. So for Henman, another frustrating day on the tortuous route to what all Britain is hoping is a place in the final. But when that final will be played is anyone's guess, with showers again forecast for the weekend. Jana Novotná is heading home for a weekend off. Last year's winner was briskly dismissed by third seed Lindsay Davenport. Thousands waited patiently for play to restart on centre court. They were rewarded with a thriller which lit up the evening gloom. Steffi Graf needing every shot in the book to see off a mighty challenge from Venus Williams. It went all the way. Graf winning in 3 long sets. And she's still on course for an amazing 8th title.
Game, set, match, Miss Graf, 2 sets to 1.
The officials here are now simply praying for better weather to help them out of what's rapidly becoming an impossible scheduling problem. One of the options being considered to play both singles finals on Sunday. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport, Wimbledon.
To recap on those results now, Tim Henman led Cedric Pioline by 1 game to love when rain stopped play. Pat Rafter and Todd Martin managed 3 games each. In the women's singles, Steffi Graf beat Venus Williams by 2 sets to 1. And the defending champion Jana Novotná is out in straight sets to Lindsay Davenport. Tomorrow, weather permitting, Tim Henman continues his match. Pete Sampras meets Mark Philippoussis, and Jelena Dokic and Alexandra Stevenson will finish their match. Cricket. England got off to a flying start in the first test against New Zealand at Edgbaston. Andy Caddick made a triumphant comeback after a 15-month international absence, taking 3 wickets early on. And Nasser Hussain showed he intends to lead by example as captain with this catch from Phil Tufnell's bowling. New Zealand finished the day all out for 226. The European Space Agency announced plans in London today for an unmanned space mission never attempted before. Starting in 2003, it's aiming for a close encounter with a comet in deep space beyond the orbit of Jupiter. Lawrence McGinty reports.
This is the European probe called Rosetta that will take the closest look ever at a comet. Deep in space, it will rendezvous with a comet called Virtanen, less than a kilometre across. Matching speeds, it'll orbit the comet, the 2 hurtling towards the sun at 1,300 miles a minute. The probe will fire a lander at Virtanen. On touchdown, that'll drill into the comet, analysing its chemical contents, which might include simple forms of the chemicals of life. Today, a quarter-size model of Rosetta was unveiled, a space probe designed to unlock the secrets of comets.
In scientific terms, they're the material from which all solar systems must have been formed. So it's the most primitive matter we could get our hands on, and it would tell us about our origins.
Comets are dirty snowballs, ice and dust left over when the planets were formed 4.5 billion years ago. Rosetta will tell scientists whether they also carry the basic chemical building blocks of life, but not until 2011, when it reaches the comet. Lawrence McGinty, ITN.
The main headline again, the Northern Ireland peace talks are still on for a little bit longer, though it looks very much as if they could end without a deal. And while we've been on air, it's been revealed that statements on where they've got to and what happens next will be made by Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern tomorrow. Tonight's financial figures now. The FTSE 100 share index closed up just over 170 points. Sorry, you can't see that there, but the biggest jump for nearly 6 months. Yes, we can. On Wall Street tonight, the Dow closed up 95 points. The pound was up a fraction against the dollar. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's papers. The Guardian leads on those faltering Ulster peace talks. Tonight it says Northern Ireland's future hangs by a thread. By contrast, the main picture is of celebrations in Edinburgh to mark the official opening of Scotland's Parliament. The Telegraph also leads on the stalemate in Northern Ireland. It says the gulf between Sinn Féin and the Unionists appears too wide to bridge. The Times reports that another 400 troops are on their way to the province as the talks drag on. It says security is being stepped up ahead of this weekend's Drumcree March. The Sun leads on claims that the rogue trader Nick Leeson is looking after fellow prisoners' savings in jail in Singapore. And the Mirror claims an exclusive with this snap of Posh Spice and her fiancé David Beckham relaxing before their wedding in Ireland on Sunday. And that's it from ITV's Nightly News. The ITV Evening News will be at 6:30. I'll be back at 11. Until then, good night.
Hello, good evening. It's a bit of a changeable weekend ahead of us, but most of us ought to see at least some sunshine. Back to tonight now, and already we've got some cloud and rain pushing up from West Wales towards the north of Ireland there. Otherwise, it's dry, the cloud breaking up, and some misty, murky conditions around. Temperatures, in fact, though, down to as low as 8 in central sheltered parts of Scotland. So we go into tomorrow morning, and let's focus on that rain that's been around. By now, into this sort of position, a band of rain more or less slicing the country there, and during the course of the day, moving ever northwards and tending to fizzle out on its eastern edge as it does so. Now, we begin the day on a rather misty, murky note. Apart from the north of Scotland, the best of the sunshine here, but then during the course of the day, the cloud and the mist breaks up, and most of us ought to see some welcome warm sunshine. So in the south, in that sunshine, we see a high of 25. Now, that's 77 in Fahrenheit. And even in places like Northern Ireland, the north of England, as well as Wales, with the improving situation, we even managed 20, 21 here. Quick look ahead on Saturday, we've got rain pushing northward, sunshine and showers behind, rain up from the southwest on Sunday. That's the sum of it on the weather front.
Power Gen. Power, whatever the weather.